Today I'm going to show you how I turn my tool handles for the carbide tools that I do sell on my website at www.tommygworkshop.com. Last video I mentioned about me purposely routing the hole off a little bit to where it's not perfectly in the center, and telling you that it will not matter as soon as you start turning it. So as you can see, as soon as you start turning it, it squares it all up, and you'll see that in the video. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started turning. So the first thing I want to do is to get the ferrule ready, get that all prepped up, cut. I do use some copper fittings I just get at a hardware store for copper piping. I get the couplings with the groove in the middle, and then I just cut the coupling right down the center line of that groove, and that way each coupling gives me 2 ferrules. After I get the ferrule cut, we're going to go ahead and put the handle blank into the lathe. Like I mentioned before, I'm going to use my chuck it up, and make sure that the groove that I cut for the bar goes towards my live center and the back end goes to the chuck. Next, I'm just going to quickly rough it out, make a cylinder with my large roughing tool. And then after that, I can measure out for my ferrule so that I can cut a tenon to put the ferrule over. Next, I'm just gonna glue the ferrule in place, just using some CA glue and some activator. It's quick and easy. The activator makes the bond instant, so as soon as I get that glued up, I can start turning. The next thing I want to do is measure out my handle. For mine, my overall length is 18 inches for the handle alone. So I'm going to mark out the 18 inches. After I get that measured out, I'm just going to start turning down the handle into a shape that I want. So in the first handle that I turn, I'm just gonna rough out the shape that I want by freehand. There's not really any measurements or anything, just whatever feels good and whatever looks good. Once I have my first handle cut, the rest of the handles will be off of measurement of the first handle. So my second handle, I'll take a measurement of my first handle and shape the second handle from that. Also, the third and fourth handle, I'm going to take the measurements off the first handle. So you can see I'm just using calipers to get my measurements off of the first handle to transfer it over to the next handle, and I'm gonna get the very high spots and the very low spots, which is where I'm going to take my measurements from. Once I've got everything pretty well shaped out on my second handle, I'm going to take my first handle, I'm going to hold it up against the second handle and just look at the edge to make sure the shapes match and are pretty consistent. Once I've gotten those as close as I can to each other, I'm going to go ahead and cut the grooves that I use as just decoration, and then I'm going to burn the wood inside the grooves with just a piece of wire that I've wrapped around 2 pieces of wood. After I get the grooves burnt in, I'm going to take one of my files and just kind of dress up the ferrule, get it started, make sure there's no glue, nothing on it, and it's just going to get things rolling for when I start polishing it up. Once I get that, I'm going to go through with some sandpaper strips that are made for the lathe. I bought the 5-roll sanding pack, but the only ones that I use is the 240, the 320, 400, and 600 grit. And I go through the handle as well as the ferrule, sanding those down. Once I've got that all sanded up, I go through 2 micro mesh pads, the 1500, which is the rust color micro mesh pad, and the 1800, which is the green micro mesh pad. Once I've got everything sanded down and the ferrule polished, I'm going to go through, wipe everything down, get all the dust off, and then I'm going to start my finish. Now what I use to finish these handles off, I use boiled linseed oil. I wipe it on, let it set and get soaked in. I come in maybe an hour later, wipe everything down, and then I'll start in on some spray shellac. I'll spray the whole thing down. I'll go ahead and let it set for a couple hours. Let it dry really well, because I'm gonna come in with some 4/0 steel wool and kind of smooth things out. Then I'm gonna go ahead and put another coat of spray shellac. Wait another couple hours. Come in with my steel wool again, polish it out, and then I'm gonna go ahead and use some orange oil, some beeswax orange oil. And then I'll friction polish it. Once it's friction polished, everything looks good. I'll go ahead and cut my handle off of the blank, and then I'll go ahead and sand down the top side where the ferrule is, and then also the bottom of the tool handle down to where the handle's flush with the ferrule, and I take the nub off of the bottom end. Once that's all sanded down, I just throw the beeswax and orange oil, and that's all I do for the top end and the bottom, because those aren't going to be handled hardly at all. Okay, so that's it. That's the handle made up. I've got 2 made up now. I'm going to be making another one for a customer. You can see these match almost perfectly in height. The grooves match. If you look down the center of the grooves, you can see that it's a pretty good match. And everything looks to the eye to be matched up pretty good. So I'm happy with these. I'm going to continue on with the rest of the handles that I have to make. But that's all there is to it. In my next video, which is going to be the last video in this series, most likely, I'm going to show you how I prep the bar, cut for the inserts, and get them epoxied into the handle. I do use a few specialty tools like my mill, my CNC machine, so if you're wanting to get ideas on how to do it without those machines, go check out my first video when I started making these lathe tools. I'll show you how I did it with a cutoff wheel. But like I said, this next video is going to be the process that I'm using now. So it'll be with a mill, with a CNC, and then epoxy it in. So look forward to that video coming out. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please like and subscribe. And as always, until next time, stay safe.